I'm whispering a bit because I don't want to wake the whole family up. But welcome to what it sounds like at just a fraction before 5 o'clock in the morning in this amazing converted quarry building, which is next to a river called the River Tane. Not quite sure whether you can hear that in the background, probably not. But you can hear this amazing chorus of birds. When I'm at home, usually I get a chorus of the A4, which for those that don't live in England is a main arterial route. And it's not quite like this. Listen to it. Beautiful. We're in Trusham, was it Trussam? Near Newton Abbot in South Devon for this week's Photo Walk.
Photography Daily, the Friday Photo Walk.
On the road then this week, South Devon, staying on the edge of East Dartmoor. That's the base anyway. With licence to roam the beautiful cove of Babacoombe, or if you can't live without a Costa in your life, close enough to Torquay, and not that far from the tourist strip that is Paynton. Lots of leafy lanes, and oddly, I must remember to show this shot on the show page, a car park for cruise liners just off the coast. The ones resting up while they wait for the good times to roll again, open invite to the captain's table, and shenanigans and steamy windows just underneath steerage. Though I appreciate not everything is like a scene from Titanic. Well, I hope not, at least. If you haven't been on a photo walk with us just yet, well, this is the show where I take a digital mailbag out with me, full of your thoughts about what making pictures means to you, feedback on the guest shows that you've heard, and just do some photo chatter, really. Plus, of course, we play some choice inspiration from former guests. Best thing of all is that you don't even really have to be a photographer for this episode. If you have a smartphone and you make pictures with it and you like to walk in the countryside, job done. You're along for the ride. You can email your letters in to studio@photographydaily.show and your pictures. This week, I think I'm in trouble for having a bag full of two brands again. How do you feel when you take pictures? Returning to the scene of the crime, a small follow-up really to our chat about Chernobyl pictures a couple of weeks back. A photo walk essay from Oregon, making pictures in spooky, disused places, or urbex, as those in the know say. I'm going to share a secret that I've never shared before about a cheeky meetup with a girlfriend in Clovelly. Neil, surely not! We're going to talk about having your own podcast, and we'll do some first things that you see stuff. Inspiration from former guests includes Nick Turpin on street shooting, Mark Wilson on making pictures off grid, Sean Tucker on being creative, and also a first. Something from another first? Yes, something from a podcast one of our patrons has been making. On that note, thank you to our amazing patrons who keep us afloat and are now part of the weekly book club and diary posts in the members only room. And thank you also to mpb.com, the number one platform when it comes to trust for buying, selling and trading used camera gear. With offices and warehouses now in Brighton, UK, Brooklyn in the States, and now Berlin for Europe. The founder, Matt Barker, who I'm hoping to go and see soon to make a short film, knew he could improve the speed and reliability and experience of trading kit online, and so with his company created an easy-to-understand online sales website, employed product experts at base, and people who actually care about photographers in customer service. Over 250,000 creatives in the UK, Europe and the US trust mpb.com for their kit needs. So, are you ready? Grab your boots, take off your lens caps, let's go explore, talk and walk.
It's the Friday Photo Walk, and I'm delighted to be in beautiful South Devon. Honestly, I could have stayed here for the whole summer and just done photo walks. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We probably wouldn't have had enough mails, but it would have been an absolute delight. Thank you very much, by the way. Last week, I'm thanking you personally. I'm considering that you were listening to last week's Friday episode, because that was the biggest episode that we've ever had on Photography Daily, on a photo walk. Absolutely convinced, of course, that's because of you. Because it's wonderful to hear your stories, what you've been up to with your photography, some of the questions that you have. But moreover, actually, these days, it tends to be commentary, I suppose, from you on what your photography means. And I think the Photo Walk episode is becoming that opportunity really to hear other photographers, whatever they are, professional or otherwise, just talking about this thing that they love, making pictures. So thank you. I'm going to do there we go, with my clipboard on my heart. Thank you. Anyway, let's start with Peter Bracewell before I get all emotional. Interesting thoughts last week, Neil, about having a camera bag full of gear that talks 2 languages. In your case, Fuji and Canon. I'm a Fujicast listener, so at first I was a bit surprised by your choice to return to what many might consider an antiquated way of working with a DSLR. I do hope Mullins has raised an eyebrow at you. Well, that's why I escaped. Peter, I thought I'd better get away so that Mullins doesn't raise one of those not inconsiderable eyebrows at me. No, he's fine. But something in your chat about working with the 2 systems really resonated with me, or at least piqued my interest. The way you choose images for your website. I would imagine we all do it to an extent, though in wedding circles, perhaps this makes even more sense. But hearing you suggest that you make your choices upon how you felt when taking the pictures that you show was very interesting. And I do think there's a difference between how you felt making the pictures and just showing emotional moments. One is about the person being photographed, and the other is tapping into the person actually taking them. Keep up the good work, and I'd be interested to hear from other listeners on this subject. All the best from Peter. See, there we go, straight away, an invite to make some comments yourself, and I think that's the direction I really want to take this show as well. Don't be shy of jumping on a subject that you hear one week and sort of adding your bit as well. I know Peter would, I certainly would be interested to hear what you have to say as well. So the email address is studio@photographydaily.show, studio@photographydaily.show. Hold on a moment, look at this. Now, I'm going to level with you that this week I'm making the photo walk across several days. So usually the photo walk is done all in one, and there's kind of would you call it a sort of a fluid movement of photographs that sort of traverse through my walk. But this week that isn't the case, mainly because I thought if I walked around and did a photo walk for a couple of hours, my family might get just a little bit peeved with me. So I've got this kind of unofficial agreement that we walk along, I trot up ahead, make a couple of photos, talk into my fluffy thing, my microphone, and then I continue a little bit later on. But I just want to stop here. We're going for lunch here. We're going for a long walk now. We're trusting the app that we've got that this is 3 miles, but I'm telling you, it looks a lot longer. I'm okay with that. There's a lot of up and down stuff, and I'm not sure what the boys are going to say, but they're behind me at the moment, so they can't hear that it's going to be, I think, a lot longer than 3 miles, 3.5 miles. This is the Cridford Arms. The Cridford Arms, Neil, I know that. Of course you do. Beautiful pub. And we've managed to get a space for lunch. I mean, usually you have to book about 8 weeks in advance. I'm telling you, I'm having a T-shirt made, or a series of T-shirts, and on the front they're just going to say things like, "No, I haven't made a booking." You will get me started on my favourite topic at the moment. We actually went along. There's some falls just along the way. I don't think they're natural falls. I think they're man-made, and so therefore you have to book to go and see something in nature that you could probably just walk to. But look, let me. I have no pocket to put you in. That for regular listeners to this show, you'll know that usually, see, we've just arrived at summer. Bang! There was like a brick wall, and there appeared summer. But usually, you'll know that I pop my microphone into a top pocket and make some pictures. But I've got no top pocket, so it's going to be a bit of a balancing act while I sort of commentate while I'm making a picture. But I want to get this lane. It's a beautiful lane. This is sort of picture postcard England. Never mind South Devon. But how can I do this? Right, I'm going to rest this here and ISO 200. Now later on, I think I've got an email that I've saved to do this in a couple of days' time. or what will be about 20 minutes later in this show. But ISO 200, it's quite bright, 500th. And there we go. Let's just try and underexpose a little bit there because it's nice, harsh or contrasty sunlight. Fabulous. Right, where were we? Gabriella Clare in Rome. Hello, Gabriella. On the subject of photographing abandoned places. Yes, last week we were talking about abandoned places. And I've actually heard from a couple of people who have suggested they'll take me on a lovely walk or walks to go visit some abandoned places and do some abandoned places photography, which I'm very much looking forward to because I must admit I'm a bit shy of walking into these places alone. I know, come on Neil, you're a big chap. You can look after yourself, I know, but my imagination runs riot. From Gabriella, hello Neil, I've just listened to the photo walk in my lunch break. This is the episode, will it be a couple of weeks back now when we talked about Chernobyl? I think it actually is. I visited Chernobyl too in 2019. I was there a whole day, pretty nerve-wracking. We had the Chernobyl radiation cloud really bad across Italy when I was a teenager. I've had thyroid issues for a few years, and a lot of people have mentioned Chernobyl as a possible cause. So it's very, very present in our minds. I bet it is, and I'm sorry to hear that. Isn't it interesting, though? I mean, Gabriella, you kind of went back to the scene of the crime, as it were. Despite the problems it's presented in your life personally, you were prepared to return. I'd be fascinated to see some of your pictures. I really would. And thank you for your mail. From Harry Gore. Just a mail to say I'm a recent convert to the show. Hello, Harry. Thank you for becoming a recent convert. I noticed a few more emails of late from new listeners, those that have recently come across. Absolute delight to have you here. Thank you for joining us. And I came here for the Pete Souza interview, stayed, especially for the photo walks. Still a bit nervous to send my own pictures. The quality of everybody else's seems to be so strong, but I will. Just a request that I think would be really interesting. How about a photo walk with a street photographer, an urban walk? Street photography is my holiday passion. All the best from Harry. Well, thank you, Harry. First up, by the way, never be afraid to send your pictures in. One easy way in might be to start sharing them in our amazing, I know what you're going to say, Neil, don't do it. I'm going to promote it in a wonderful Facebook group with some super members that share so much. It's not like one of those groups where people try and be too clever. You don't want to do it that way, you want to do it this way. No, it's a generous group, a fantastic group, and it's growing all the time. So that's a good place to start. But just a request, really. Don't go into the group and just dump a picture. Make sure that you say something about it. Give some context, give some story behind the photographs. That's what we're really trying to impress upon people in that group. Oh, some wonderful... It's a carpet of bluebells. Beautiful. Equally, just the other side, carpet of stingers. Not so beautiful. But that's one way, Harry. And as per your request for some street photography, well, we have spoken to a few. Oh, excuse me, I'm limbering underneath. The stingers seem to be coming across. I mean, they're ginormous stingers. That's not a stinger. That's a triffid. Where were we? Sorry, I was worried about the thing lashing out at me. But yeah, photo walk with a street photographer. Great idea, Harry. Very good idea. And that's a yes. I'm not sure. I know Nick Turpin has listened to this show in the past. Nick, are you listening now? This is my open invite to say, because Nick's a fantastic street photographer, as you well know. And he'd make a fantastic companion for a photo walk episode. So he would be one. I tell you who else I'd like to go on a photo walk with. And I'm sure this isn't out of the question. I'll drop him a mail. Will be our old friend John Manell, the portrait per day man. We keep talking about this, about actually taking a walk together in his neck of the woods in London and doing some street portraits. I'd love to watch the way that he does that. So there we go, couple of ideas straight away. Why don't we, I tell you what, let me play you a little piece of an episode that I had with Nick Turpin. He was talking about the reintroduction of In Public, coming back after a few years of it being quiet. He was talking about some of the photographers that feature in the new In Public, and it was quite early on actually. What was it, episode 15? Goodness, it was pretty much a year ago, wasn't it? Here's Nick Turpin with a bit of inspiration.
You know, when I look at a photographer's work, it's their intelligence I love, their wit. You know, it's such a mental thing, photography. You know, it's really nothing to do with cameras in many ways. It's that way that the photographer decodes the street and sees the possibilities and records them. And you know, everybody's completely different. I mean, it's growing all the time. I think, you know, there was sort of Western European and American street photographers that sort of really dominated in the 60s and 70s, and at the beginning of this sort of resurgence of interest. But now you're seeing a huge number of photographers in India, in Thailand, the Philippines, and also you know, quite a lot of Eastern European and indeed Russian photographers. There's a lot of street photography where, you know, somebody has seen something quirky or interesting, but there's a difference between seeing it and framing it beautifully and actually making a picture out of it. If we widen our, you know, what we accept as street photography, without going as far as staging, manipulating, computational photography, if we stay within those boundaries, there's still a huge amount of innovation and so many extraordinary ways of photographing the public realm. And that's what I hope to show here. And actually, one thing you might find interesting if you're visiting the site is that there's a little article I've written called Street Photography Breaking the Template. And I show there a lot of examples of other photographers who are not In Public members, but people who are photographing the public realm in a different and innovative and interesting way.
There we go, Nick Turpin. And that's not a bad idea from Harry just before. First-time writer who said we should take an urban walk with a street photographer for one of our photo walks. Somebody who knows what they're doing. Harry didn't say that bit. I'm just adding that. But you might as well have, Harry, because it would be true. Welcome to the Friday Photo Walk. It's me with my microphone, us with our cameras, making a few pictures, just enjoying some time together. That's what the Friday Photo Walk is all about. We'll do another one of our first things that you see a little bit later on, because that's been it's been fantastic to see the pictures and where you are when you're listening to the Friday Photo Walk. I just want to come down this, midges galore. I'm going to be showing signs of being bitten, I think, by midges this evening. I want to get a picture of this wonderful stream down here. There's a stream and there's a rickety bridge going across it. I do love a good rickety bridge. Hold on, it's just down here. Step, step, step. More nettles. This is going to be nettles week, I can tell. Right. I've no pocket to put you in. I've not even brought my North Face jacket away with me. I trusted the weather forecast to give us nice weather all week, and it's been good for its word. Hold on, let me just balance you precariously. Where can I put you? I know. Just here. Here we go. It's a bit darker down here, so 60th. And 4, 5, 6 maybe. Shoot this in a kind of, I think I'm going to go with a portrait and a landscape orientation, see which one I prefer. Beautifully noisy birds above me. Another one of those. Listen to that. Fabulous. Right. You have to do a bit of imagining here because it's a fabulous piece of work sent in. Here's one from Dennis Linden. Thank you, Dennis, for this. Who practically, he's made a photo essay out of his walk a week or so back in Medford, in Oregon. Do you know what? I'm saving up all these worldwide places with my sincere dream and hope that one day we find somebody who says, I tell you what, Neil, I'm a very rich sheikh who is into his photography. I'd like to sponsor the show for the next year, and here you go around the world doing photo walks with all these people that write in. Well, that'd be very kind of you. Thank you very much. Where do I sign? Anyway, Dennis Linden says, a combination of rather elegant, very old, early 1900s, ancient by American standards, his words, not mine, tree-lined neighbourhoods, and modern crap, again his words. I was taking one of my 8 to 10 kilometre walks for the heart, multiple meanings implied, when listening to episode 231. This was the scene not 20 seconds after I heard your request. Oh yes, our first things that you see requests. I'm standing at the peak of my walk route, sipping a bit of iced tea, oh that sounds perfect, and cooling myself in the shade of oak trees. This is poetic. It really is, Dennis. You'll see these pictures, by the way, because I'm going to pop them on the web page. It's quite impossible to fully explain the visible displays of philosophical division in American society today, driven by the completely unrealistic, blatantly false, and/or frankly seditious claims of a former president. Well, we don't want to get too political, but again, they're Dennis's words. People have taken to heart their own personal views of what the world should be like. At the same time, others embrace the multinational, multicultural heritage that is this country. As you walk down the streets of my hometown, any home with a flag flying probably represents the positive view of America. However, there are just as many flags with abnormal blue stripes or flags with the name of an individual rather than the ideal of a country represented. Bizarrely, you will find 2 lawn chairs on the front lawn, and it's a sign of defiance for the need to socially isolate and close certain businesses to prevent the spread of this virus. This is the Memorial Day weekend in the United States. So this is a couple of weeks ago, of course, when he wrote this. So as I walk around the town, I see a lot more flags than usual. It's important to try and distinguish which symbol this flag represents. I know that these thoughts are not unique to this country. My home country of Canada has its own fair share of bigotry and hatred, despite the fact that I truly embrace cities like Vancouver and Toronto, where the multicultural heritage is allowed to flourish, usually in peace and harmony with the rest of society. Well, thank you very much for your writing there. I appreciate the time that you've taken. You'll have to see the show page today for the images that go with this fabulous, well, I'm going to call it a photo walk essay from Dennis. And look out for there's a photo that features a boat on a trailer. He says, you want to go fishing? This is how us Americans go fishing. Anyway, there's the pictures also of a wonderful child script on the side of a post box. There's a VW bug. There's post-COVID trash and the manor where wealthy seniors choose to retire. So there you go, says Dennis, 9 kilometres. A sunny Friday afternoon, actually listening to your podcast halfway around the world. Have a wonderful weekend. And you too. Thank you very much. There's a lot of aircraft activity. Come on, we're in South Devon. What's going on? You know me for the aircraft flying overhead. Give me some peace and quiet. Oh, look at this blanket of buttercups. Beautiful. Dennis, thank you. I appreciate you taking so much time writing that photo walk essay. A bit political in places. We can cope with that. If you'd like to send in your thoughts, you can direct message me through the Facebook group, of course, or you can email me, or you can send it via the contact form on the website, photographydaily.show, or of course, send me your pictures and your thoughts to studio@photographydaily.show. Look at this, in the middle of nowhere, there's this kind of old corrugated, looks like, or really old caravan. I do believe we found a deserted urban space or urban building. Hang on a minute, let me try and get a picture of it. It's just kind of like poking out of the undergrowth. The undergrowth has swallowed it, devoured it, if you like. We're bright sunshine here, so I'm ISO 200. I'm going to go on 250th. I think, I'm going to have to go more. 250th. Maybe, actually, 1000th. F5.6. See what we can do. Let's try that again. Wonderful. Go in, Neil. I'm not going in. No. It's a Friday photo walk. Good to have your company. Erik Jacobi Peterson from Denmark land, as it's now becoming known on this show, for completely inexplicable reasons. Hello, Neil. Listening to the Friday photo walks on the bus to and from work is just perfect. I know. I didn't take an image as requested in the bus. Ah, yes, the first thing you see picture. It's caught on, this idea, isn't it? This should have been an easy one, Eric. Consider yourself chastised. You can raise a camera in a bus, take a picture out of a window, surely. There was another thing you mentioned, urbex. Oh yes, we're back to urban exploration. I did dabble a bit in urbex several years ago. Life happened and I got away from it, but I really enjoyed it. Walking into an old building, this is perfect timing, honestly. I didn't plan that, you'll have to believe me. Walking into an old building, usually a factory, and snooping around. It started as a kid when I was in the Netherlands during the summer. The place we stayed at had an amazing old building next to it. As a kid, my parents didn't allow me to go in there, but at some point, the allure got too big. It was an old hotel, amazing place, and a complete ruin. Fast forward, and I finally found a few places and got exploring with my camera. I've attached some of them in the way that I would edit them today, but on Flickr, they're placed as they were done all those years ago. Well, there's some Flickr addresses here. I will share these, as always, on the photo walk page. So today's show page, you'll see all the pictures, things that we talk about, people that have shared stuff. The first thing that you see, pictures, and these albums, these Flickr albums from Eric with a K. And the first one is an old brick yard, which is amazing. The offices, they have files still out. It's like 28 days later. It reminds me very much, actually, of... see, I've done some urbex. Hang on a moment. There's me saying I'm too scared to do the urbex. Although the example, or maybe there's two examples I'm going to give you now, are very much because I was given permission and the keys. So it's not quite as daring as yours, Eric, with a K, from Denmark land. Yeah, there was a place called Botley's, which is now a wedding venue. Is it still a wedding venue? Are we doing weddings? What's a wedding? And it was an old catering school. I'm pretty sure that it was the old catering school that was... Am I going to get the right name? I'm sure it was Gordon Ramsay who was going to open a catering school. And something happened. It didn't become it. And it became this tremendous... it's a Palladian mansion. And in the flight path of Heathrow, but you hardly hear the aircraft. And yeah, and I went in when it had also been, I think, some offices, an insurance company, something like that. And I went around this whole mansion and got pictures. It was almost like people had moved out just the day before. I mean, there was no rotting vegetables or anything on tables or sandwiches, but it was as if one day somebody had come along and said, "Oi, come on, up sticks, move on out," because there were files still left open, all sorts of things. That was interesting. And then Notley Abbey, which is Thame in Oxfordshire, or just on the Oxfordshire border, isn't it? And that was fascinating because that was owned by Laurence Olivier and Vivian Leigh, Hollywood darlings, of course. And they had this house for years. Then it was owned by a Canadian lady, and then I think she sold it to I think it was her that sold it to the wedding venue. And they let me go in there before it had been completely converted. And it's an very old monastery. And it has a bit of a history. It has a huge history, dating back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. But I remember going into the attic. Somebody said to me, go into the attic, it's fascinating in there. I'd never had such a chill go down my back as when I was in that attic. So, I've done some urbex. There we go. I'd forgotten those. Perhaps I should dig out those pictures. But from Eric's pictures, there's an old brickyard, which is, as I say, amazing. Then there's an old disused test centre with some very ominous-looking spiky things. Should you make it to Denmark land, says Eric with a K, then I can tell you just how I had to sit still in order not to be spotted in one place that I visited. Thanks again for the show. Best regards from Eric Jacobi Peterson. Hang on, I'm going to stop here. We've ventured up the... I'm staying at this quarry, as you know by the front end of the show today. And I've wandered out past the collie dog that was a bit angry with me, that belongs to the farmer. And there's a path here to what was the quarry, where they dug all the granite out. And look at this. This is fantastic. It just opens up onto a huge lake. Well, I say huge lake. It's huge-ish. Apparently, the farmer said the height of the, I suppose it's like a cliff edge. Look, I'll put a picture in and you can see it. The height of it, which is, what is it looking at it? 100 feet? Oh, I'm terrible with things like this. 150 feet? Well, Neil, you used to be a pilot. It's probably a good job I'm not. 150 feet? I don't know. Anyway, apparently it goes much further down into the lake, which you can't swim in because this is blue-green algae, which is such a shame. It's such a hot day. Imagine that through the lake. Fantastic. Although I'm a bit funny about not being able to see through water. Not quite sure what lurks beneath. Apparently there is an old Land Rover down there, and they use this now for the police to come and do their dive training. So I don't know what's in the old Land Rover down there. Who knows? Let me I tell you what, let me get a picture of this, because if I look back, there's a fantastic workshop. Just walk up here a bit. There's a workshop that sort of looks down towards this lake, and I can see it now. And it's one of those things that there's not so many clouds in the sky, but I don't want them to cover this wonderful, look, there's a shaft of light coming down. I can't see it, Neil, make a picture. All right, here we go. We're at 500th. There we go, I can just about see that. There we go. I mean, you have to move the camera very slowly, and then comes the shaft of light. What are we, f5.6? And ISO 200, and there we go. Wonderful, look at this. Fabulous. Great workshop. And if I turn the other way, I'm going to make some pictures of the lake here as well. So, okay, so this urbex thing, going back to Eric's mail that we have to do, I need some suggestions now, people that you may follow, actually, who set the trends for this. If we could have a chat with a few urban explorers on the show that do this for a hobby, and not necessarily a hobby, maybe some people sell prints from it. I can certainly see the art in it, that's for sure. But I mean, I don't really know the urbex scene. It's not hard to find people who do it. I mean, Google is my friend here, but for those into the art of this, I need some folk who are considered the leaders in this. I suppose actually I'm going to play some inspiration now. This is a bit of urban exploration to an extent. Let me play you an excerpt of episode 211, the photographer Mark Wilson talking about his book, A Wounded Landscape, which is an incredibly potent piece of work about the Holocaust. It was a fascinating episode in terms of talking to Mark and the book that he made. And as much as anything, it was a really interesting episode to find out, when you've got this excellent idea, how to put a book together, all the logistics, the practical side of that. But this is Mark Wilson. I think we've played this excerpt before, so forgive me if we have, but why not? Here he comes across a building with with a bit of history, a bleak history at that.
What I knew there was at this location, which someone had found for me, is there was this barrack, this K-12 barrack that you mentioned, which was the children's barrack. So this is where the children who were separated from the parents, they were kept here. But I'd also heard this story about this Swiss Red Cross worker who had gone there to try and help these children, and that she had brought paints with her, and that the children had painted these scenes onto the walls of their barrack, that they'd painted kind of mountains and forests and trains going through tunnels and oceans and stuff like that, and that you could potentially still see these scenes on the walls. So I spent this kind of 1-2 hours looking for this particular barrack, and when I found it, it was a bit like the size of a British classroom, let's say, a bit narrower, but the roof had caved in and all the roof tiles were on the floor, and one side had collapsed, so it was just like a 3-sided open roof building. But there was this snaking path through the tiles on the floor, which I followed, and that led me to some of these paintings. So you can still see these paintings on the wall, and they're incredibly faint, but you can see outlines of blue, and you can see this, the sapphire of the little green trees, and you can see a ship and a train going into a tunnel, and it's beautiful and amazing. But then what happened, this kind of strangely surreal moment, is that my right or left boot, I forgot now, I think my right boot stepped on one of the tiles that was on the floor, which was one of the old roof tiles, and it made this horrific crack sound. So there I am, I'm kind of standing in this 3-sided, no-roof building in a fairly open plateau in the southeast of France. And this huge sound that, with symbolism, it was like one of the children screaming. One of the children was kept in the barracks. So I kind of walked back out this path, out the building. And then as I walked away, I noticed these small little flowers on the ground, and they were just weeds, I think, but they seemed quite nice. And I walked past them. And again, that kind of symbolism, I suddenly thought that these flowers are symbolizing the children in this barrack, and I should go back and photograph one. And my photography until this point has always been very slow, and it still is, but it's all tripod based. And I photographed one of these flowers, and then I walked away again, and then I stopped after about 5 yards, and I remember really vividly thinking to myself, what am I doing? How can I leave the rest of these children? Which is obviously a strange thing to say, because these are just flowers, but the visualization, the symbolism was so strong in my mind because of where I was and what I knew and what had happened and those drawings I'd just seen. So I went back and fairly manically photographed every single one of these flowers on the ground because I had to. And it's not because I thought this will be brilliant for the work. I just thought I had to do this. And at that moment, I was thinking, if I don't record every single one of these children, and I remember those words, I didn't say flowers. I said to myself, if I don't record every single one of these children, they'll be forgotten forever.
The incredible Mark Wilson. And of course, I'll leave links to all the episodes that I talk about on the show page today. If you haven't visited the show page, please do, because you'll see all the photographs and people that contribute to this show with their ideas and their thoughts, some links to their Instagram where they've provided them and so on. Here's one from Duncan Ferguson. Hello, Duncan. Oh, hang on. There's another slither of light falling. I've walked further along this path. There's a slither of light falling in the distance here. You know me for slithers. Hold on. There's a plane doing acrobat practice somewhere. Can you hear that in the background? There we go. Right, I'm going to have to really underexpose this. Bear with me. I can't put you in my pocket at the moment, so it means I'm trying to I'm sort of wrestling because I'm using my X Pro 1 with the Yashica 28mm vintage lens. And usually, as I said right near the head of the show today, I have a North Face jacket which has a top left-hand pocket which is absolutely perfect for holding my iPhone that I use for the microphone. And I pop you in my pocket, as I say, and make pictures. But during the summer, there's no pocket popping going on. I kind of I either have to balance the microphone somewhere close to where I'm making the picture, or sort of hold it at the same time, sort of pre-focus, try and do everything with my right hand. Thank God it's not a heavy camera. Hold on, slither of light. I'm going to well underexpose here. So what should we do? 1,000th again. There we go. 5/6. There we go. Another one of those. Always 2, just to make certain. Where were we? Oh yes, Duncan Ferguson. Thank you very much for your mail. I've been on holiday this week in the beautiful Devon. Oh, snap, Duncan. That is where I am now. Are you down this path somewhere? Should meet up for a nice little pint down the local. If you've booked and you can get in. Did you book 8 weeks early? My Friday photo walk, he says, was spent exploring the coastline. Wonderful. I met some characters along the way. A chap walking 1,000 kilometres for cancer research in memory of his late wife, and a local who's lived in the picturesque village of Clovelly for 67 years. Duncan Ferguson Photo is his Insta address, and you'll see some of these pictures. But I'll tell you what, I'll put these particular ones on the show page for today. Let me tell you about my Clovelly story, which I have not shared for, I think, my entire life. So, Duncan, you've sort of sparked a memory, because I did not want my late parents to know about this. So, I went with a friend of mine, Mick. Me and Mick, our girlfriends were staying close to Clovelly, or maybe in Clovelly. I mean, Clovelly, you can't camp there, can you? So, was it possible they could have been on a campsite at the top of Clovelly? Is there anything there, Duncan? Anyway, I seem to remember that's where they were staying. Yeah, they were staying there. But me and Mick, the biker, had arranged to meet them secretly, because these are the days before mobile phones. So, when you made arrangements, you really had to make arrangements and stick to them. But myself and Mick, we went off to Wales just so that we could get a ticket to prove that we'd gone across the bridge or something. Then we doubled back. And, it's quite a double back for those that know the country. We went out of Wales, down to Clovelly. This is a steep village. And we went to a wine bar. And I do remember this. We just drank strawberry wine. Now, I was a lot younger, and I don't think I could handle my wine very well. And Mick was even worse than me. And he almost fell off the pier at the end, because you go right down and into sort of fishing village port, if you will, and practically nearly fell off the edge. There was some chap that caught him and said, "You all right, mate?" and caught him before he went down. How close was that to a disaster? But our parents never knew. So there we go. Duncan, and you, listening, you now know a secret. But I'm not sure who to say don't tell it to, because both my mum and dad, sorry mum and dad, let me look in the air. Sorry, but they never knew. Here's a direct message from Greg Rogowski. Hello, Neil. I've noticed that you tend to... Oh, yes, I said I was going to mention this. You tend to use ISO 200 on just about everything in your photo walks. Forgive the ignorance here. Maybe you can expand a bit about that. Is it the camera that you use that just seems to work best at that setting for the English weather overall, which I've heard is generally cloudy? Yes, it is. Although some of your walks seem like England sees a great deal of sunshine. Asking as I find myself in... using all sorts of ISOs on walks. Thank you. Well, in terms of practicalities, Greg, the X Pro 1 is not great at high ISO. I would put it probably, maybe not in a similar vein to the original Canon 5D I had, which, if you went above ISO 800, it was it snowing? It was a bit of a snowstorm. The X Pro 1 it's not as bad as that, but I do tend to keep it as low as possible for quality. And if I want to add grain in, Neil, what is this? What are you doing? Well, if I want to, I can, so I keep it low. And I treat the ISO like it's a film camera, really. I'm not changing in between shots. So I tend to put it somewhere and stay. In the same way that I've been using, and you will see some shots from it, I'm going to do a mass developing session at some stage. But I've been using I've used ISO 400 and ISO 100 film within the so FP4 and HP5 I've been using within the Leica that I took away with me, and I haven't got it with me at the moment around my neck, but in the same way that I can't change the ISO on that, so I tend to shoot what I've got and then write everything else, really. So it's no great story behind it, that's just the way it is. Also, I was wondering if you had any suggestions or whatnot to starting an effective podcast such as yours. Effective? I hope it's more than effective. Effective sounds so clinical. Effective? The gear you use, where you find your guests. I have a few friends in the queue with my groups that will be a good start. I actually had wanted to start a podcast exactly like PD earlier this year as I transitioned into the full-time photo thing.
in reality using it as another platform to have a sort of auditorial blog. I discovered yours and of course have been hooked. Maybe worth a more in-depth chat, even when you have the time. A podcast mentor, if you will. Well, I do mentor, yes. And it's going to be a shameless plug, but that is partly my work these days. It's not a great deal of my work, but I've started mentoring in sound production, and in particular companies and individuals that want to do what you're suggesting, use audio as another, and I suppose that's where the effective word comes in, isn't it? An effective way, a friendly way, approachable way, a personable way, all those words, to engage with somebody who you may employ, not just as a photographer. I'm about to photograph a yoga instructor, and one of the things I'll be discussing with her is having an audio blog, if you like, maybe a podcast that she can discuss what she does with prospective clients, because it is this amazing passive medium where you can be you can be doing anything. You can be painting the walls, taking the dog for a walk, out on your photo walk. You can be doing anything. And the great thing about a passive medium is it doesn't mean you have to take your eyes off and look at a screen. You can listen to a voice. It's a very, very, it's a wonderful way to communicate. I much prefer communicate than effective, because it is a really nice way to talk with somebody on a one-to-one level. That's what's good about podcasting. That's what's good about radio. It really is. But so I've been doing some mentoring, and Terry Price actually is one of our fantastic patrons, and he wanted to release a podcast called The Creative Playground, which he's done, and it's now on Spotify. It will be on all the other platforms as well, but for the moment you'll find it easily on Spotify. I'll leave a link to his work in the show notes. Terry Price, writer, photographer and creative coach, helps you reclaim your creative spark and teaches ways to manifest it in your daily life. It's a wonderful podcast, and I've been talking with Terry about how he could, because he's had this creative playground idea for a long time, but now he's turned it into a podcast. He's a photographer, yes, but it's not his full-time occupation. But this podcast isn't really just about photography. It's you'll get the idea. I tell you what, I'm going to play a little bit of Terry. I've not done this before. I know we played a few YouTube channels in the past, but I don't think I've ever played anybody else's podcast. Terry, don't take me to court over this. I'm going to play a little bit of your podcast in a minute, because I'm really proud of your first episode. And I like to feel that I've been on this journey. Well, we've been on this journey together. But how do you start? I suppose just an idea. I mean, what do you want to talk about? Fantastic thing about a podcast is you can just pick up a microphone and do what I'm doing at the moment, walking through the countryside and just chatting. Yeah, you'll get a few strange looks when you come across people sometimes, but that's how you start, an idea, and then just talk. Technical stuff, mixers, invest in a good mic and so on. That makes a difference. I know people say that equipment doesn't make a difference, but it does. You can listen to a podcast and you can listen to production, and you'll soon hear somebody that has experience and knows how to audio mix from somebody who's not so good, maybe not so knowledgeable. Maybe that's a bit cruel. And then I suppose microphone-wise, get yourself a decent microphone. That's the one thing I do suggest to people. So many people say to me, I want to start a podcast. What's the cheapest microphone I can buy? Well, it's a bit like a photographer saying, I want to be a professional photographer. What's the cheapest piece of glass I can possibly put on the front of my camera? No, I don't think that does anybody any favours. That's your investment, isn't it? When you're a photographer, a good piece of glass. But I tell you what, let's play a piece of Terry's Creative Playground podcast. I think this is, he's just such a great storyteller.
I remember family trips to visit relatives in Kentucky, but right off the top of my head, I think about spending time at my grandmother's house. Now, you need to understand that my grandmother was not your stereotypical grandmother. She loved us dearly, but I don't remember fresh-baked cookies or reading books at bedtime. In fact, fairly recently I was reminiscing with one of my Kentucky cousins about our family, and I mentioned that my grandmother was not like the rest of her siblings, and he responded, she was a little hellcat. It took me back for a second, but I realized he was right. She was her own person, and I loved going to her home to visit. I specifically remember visiting in the springtime and how her backyard was always filled with clover and dandelions, and then blinking fireflies after sundown. Our lawn at home was mowed so often, clover and dandelions never had a chance. I still recall the clover under my bare feet, accompanied by the occasional searing pain when I stepped on a bee. I didn't realize until much later that poor bee received the worst end of that meetup. Later, we would sit out on the back porch and wait until night when we could catch lightning bugs, as we called them. We'd put them in a jar and create our own lamp. It only took one time to realize that I needed to let them go before heading off to bed. But those jars full of fireflies fueled my imagination to play pretend all sorts of things, from being a pirate manning his watch on the seas at night, or maybe someone who was trying to scare up enough light to find his way out of the woods. And after going off to bed and the house getting perfectly quiet, would I hear the roars and the whistles of the trains along the tracks that were just 5 houses down from us.
Well, I'm hoping that's been some inspiration for you. If you've thought about starting your own podcast or maybe putting some audio onto your website, I'm, as you know, I'm in this transitional stage of building my new website, and I'm certainly going to have more audio on my website. I think it's a great way to meet and trust people. It is. The amount of times I've had people listen to the photo films on the existing websites that I've got and say, it's great to hear something, which is not something you usually expect, is it, when you go to a photography website? And I don't think it matters what you do, what kind of photographer you are, whether you're a wedding photographer, portrait photographer, commercial, food. It's applicable to everything, isn't it? Really, you can talk about what you photograph. And it's just another way, isn't it, in these modern times to talk to people. Welcome to the Friday Photo Walk. While we're about it, it's me with my microphone and us with our cameras, making some pictures, taking some time together, reading out mails from the mailbag. And as I said near the start of the show, thank you very much for all the wonderful mails that you send and the thoughts that you have. And don't be shy if you hear something and you think, I'd like to talk a little bit more on that subject from somebody else that emailed in, then don't be a stranger. Please send it. I'm delighted to hear it. Right, shall we let's do a first thing that you see picture, shall we? Because this is sort of grown in popularity. Thank you so much for the pictures that you send in. It's fantastic to see where you're actually listening to the podcast. I have this romantic notion, as I've said before, that you'll be out somewhere in the countryside, somewhere in the world, wherever, Malaysia, Australia, Russia, America, Canada, Denmark land, wherever you are. But it seems that some of you are most definitely in your office listening, but that's fine too. Right, so here we go. This is the rule. First of all, look for your camera, whatever you're going to make a picture on. Have a look for it now. Find it, because when we start, I just want you to have your camera. No complications, no distractions. Doesn't matter what you're using. An iPhone is fantastic, or a smartphone, whatever flavour. A GoPro, as we said before. Who keeps a GoPro handy? Well, I don't know. Some people do. Your camera, your DSLR, your mirrorless, whatever your picture-making apparatus is, grab it. Right, you got it? Put it on whatever setting you want, automatic, aperture, priority, program, whatever. And I want you to lift it to your eye. I'm going to do it with you. So hold on. I haven't got a top pocket to put you in at the moment, as you know. It's T-shirt. I'm going to have one stitched into the T-shirt. No, Neil, that's what our mums used to do years ago. Don't make me stitch something into the top of a T-shirt. Right, pick it up. I've got something I'm making a picture of straight away. It's going to be greenery because I'm out in the countryside on one of my countryside walks. Poke that camera the direction that you see, the first thing that you see, and I'm not even going to make two pictures. First thing that you see. There we go. And you can send it in to studio at photographydaily.show. 2,000 pixels wide, please. That's important because I'm getting some pictures that are way, way, way below, and I can't use them when they're really small because they just pixelate and look rotten. So do remember to send them at 2,000 pics. That's fantastic. First thing that you see. Right, here's one from Paul Walbrink. Is it Walbrink? Yes. Hello, Neil. Another first-time writer. I've been listening to your podcast for a while and enjoy every episode. I thought I'd introduce myself. Suffice to say I'm a misplaced Anglophone in a Francophone world just across the channel. Oh, I wish I could. My Auntie Sue lives in where she lives? It's about an hour north of Toulouse. Oh, I love where she lives. I could be a Francophone. This idea of a first thing you see started for me the week before you asked us to do it in the podcast. Really? Do. Picture yourself going on a journey. I'd walked into town to run some errands and as usual brought my camera with me. I wasn't feeling inspired and hadn't seen anything interesting to photograph when you saw something to take a picture of. And I thought, uh-oh, Neil's already found something. The pressure is on. That's why that's why I call them my somethings and nothings, by the way, Paul. If I can just get a picture of something, then I feel I'm kind of away. It's the way I work professionally as well. When I rock up somewhere, it doesn't matter what I'm photographing, I just need to get that first frame, done. And then I feel like this, whoosh, all the pressure drains away, and I can just crack on. I suppose in this day and age, Paul, on the floor, as we've talked about over the last few weeks, even a discarded mask is a shot, isn't it, these days? Paul says, I looked around desperately as you were setting up, and then I saw the letterbox. As you were clicking your shutter, I did the same. Click. I considered sending it in and letting you know about this little game I'd created for myself. It helped me find inspiration where I thought there was none. It got my creative juices flowing, and the rest of the walk I managed to find several nice images. You see, Paul? Pressure off. Then the images start to present themselves, don't they? I started thinking this could be a fun thing to do with your audience. However, being rather timid, I talked myself out of sending it in. Imagine my shock when the following week you actually suggested we do that very thing. This resulted in the macro shot of the moss and lichen. Serendipity? Still. Fear kept me from sending in the shots. I'm a bit confused here because it sounded like we were doing it at the same time, but you'd had the idea the week before. I'm a simple man, Paul. I really am. This week, he says, I walked out of the house on a planned photo walk into the town via an old pathway, fully intending upon continuing the synchronized, unsynchronized shutter game. As I was walking down the hill, you started talking about abandoned buildings, and just in front of me was the old abandoned tannery. Coincidence? I think not. I promptly abandoned my planned walk in favour of playing with these old abandoned buildings. When you started talking about the people that had already sent in photos to the first thing you see challenge, I felt as if I'd somehow contributed to this fantastic idea. Great minds obviously think alike. Or is there some sort of psychic connection at play here? I like the challenge of finding and creating a shot on a moment's notice. I do hope this becomes a regular feature on your photo walk episodes. This time I couldn't let my shyness keep me from attempting to take credit for this great idea. Why not? Paul, we'll share the idea. I love that. That's the thing about this show. I said right at the start, and it's becoming more and more apparent to me that this photo walk edition is it's about us, isn't it? It's a joint expedition. It really is. I feel like we take each other on this journey, don't we? I'm even thinking about renaming the feature the Paul Walbrink moment. What do you think, Paul? Huh? All right, I'm going to put Paul's pictures on the show page today. I looked up synchronicity, by the way. What is synchronicity? It's a term originally coined by psychologist Carl Jung that refers to deeply meaningful coincidences which mysteriously occur in your life. When you experience synchronicity, you'll have experiences that seem far too significant to be mere day-to-day serendipitous encounters. I suppose that's a bit like when we mention something in the car, and then moments later, Instagram throws up an advert. No, it's not really like that, is it? The Friday Photo Walk. I've got a feeling that this week's episode is going to be longer than the 1 hour that I'd promised to extend them to. It's gone a bit further, hasn't it? Do you mind? Are you all right about that? You can always not listen to the last mail of the week. No, don't. We have a good last mail of the week time. No, you can't do that. You just have to stick with us to the end. Do you mind me mentioning the patrons quickly? No, go on, Neil. Why not? The patron membership is growing, which is fantastic. We have an additional episode called More every single Thursday, which is I usually choose a subject, and then there's there's our book club. And this week, actually, with a sort of slight nod to my good friend, the old mucker Kevin Mullins, my co-host on the Fuji cast. And he usually he gets a bit upset about the phrase snaps. Although at one stage he used to describe himself as a snapshotographer. But as we've discussed on the show before, that was really a kind of a reverse dig at a few people that were, I think, a tad cruel about his work and the way that he worked. So he kind of had, I think, the last laugh by naming himself a snapshotographer. But he does usually say, they're not called snaps, they're photographs. But Elliot Erwitt, who are we to argue, has a fantastic book called Snaps. And that's, or is it Snap? Hang on. Well, anyway, we talked about it yesterday in the book club. And also on Patreon now, I'm going to start putting ideas up. And you get an email when you've joined, whenever one of our posts goes up on the very easy to use Patreon app, then I'm going to be sharing pictures and small movies and all sorts of things on top of our book club as well. So every Thursday, definitely, but also during the week, another couple of opportunities. Sometimes it might be things that I've seen, or there was a book that my good friend Giles shared with me from a wonderful Japanese photographer that I haven't got the book, but I do want to share this incredible film. I think it's going to be so inspirational when it comes to your photo walks. And it certainly has, it just injected me with so much enthusiasm for just making pictures of even sort of reflections on the floor and stuff like that. So that's what I'll be sharing. I'll be sharing in the Patreon app. And of course we have our Zoom challenge each month. The May challenge, Release Your Inner William Eggleston, is now up on the website. If you go to photographydaily.show, then look for the photo challenge and look at the May one. There's some fantastic pictures on there. And initially we started choosing sort of winners, but I felt a bit awkward doing that. And after a couple of winners, I thought, I tell you what, I want to showcase the work, and instead of having winners in that. Before we do a first thing that you see, now, I've come out later on in the evening. This has been a funny photo walk this week because I've recorded the links at different times. They've not necessarily followed on from each other. But I wanted to come back to this quarry lake later on in the evening when the sun had come across and illuminated the lake a bit better. And I want to get a reflection. And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do with it. It's not big and it's not clever, but it's I quite like the way that it can work. I'm going to get a picture of the water, just a slither of the water, but quite a lot of rock face. Then I'm going to flip it. Oh, Neil, come on, that's been done 1,000,000 times. That's an old trope. Well, maybe, but I'm going to do it. So hang on, we're there now. I really would like a wide angle on this. I haven't got that. But needs must, 2/50th, 5, 6, possibly 8, I don't know. Still at ISO 200, obviously. Let's get hang on. I need to stoop down a bit more. Oh, the old knees. Fabulous. Well, I say fabulous. You'll be the judge. I'll pop that on the show page. This week, by the way, the show page, my pictures are a bit of a ragtag because there are some pictures from places that I haven't made the photo walk at. Got some pictures of Torquay. If you see the picture of the gull, that is the gull that we are pretty certain did something that comes naturally to gulls on my wife's shoulder. No word of a lie. She would not let me take a photograph of the shoulder, but we're pretty sure that was the gull because it followed us. We called it Herman. There's a story in that for another day. So there's a few more pictures in there that don't really relate to the photo walk segments that you've heard, but variety's the spice. First thing that you see pictures this week that are also on the website show page: Craig Wilson, Andy T, the Dunes, Lynn Fraser, the black and white abstract, beautiful. Jens Roder, John Colin Mayer, Craig, have I mentioned? Oh no, it's Craig Hughes, not Craig Wilson. Craig Hughes, Dominic Contreras, who was in domestic bliss at that moment, you'll see it. Tim Binder, Michael Fox with his wires, proving that not everybody's out on a walk at the moment I ask you to make a picture. There are more, and we'll get to them in the coming weeks, I promise. So thank you very much for sending them in, and hopefully you'll have joined in with today's. And Theodore Stana, based out of Stockholm in Sweden. Dear Neil and team. Team? Well, it's kind of a small team. There's me. There's my wife, Sam, and now Neil Ford is helping us out a bit as well. So, Neil, you should get a mention, definitely. Thank you ever so much for your thoroughly enjoyable podcast, for having thought of the, as you call it, meditative, I can never say that. Try saying that quickly. And I'm sober. Meditative photo moment during the photo walks. It's called the photo moment, isn't it? Well, it's not really, no, but if you want to call it that, that's fine. You know, it's kind of become known as the first thing you see, but it's going to be all sorts of names, I think. A bit late, I'm sure, but here are the photos made on the hour of my listening to the podcast, at least. I tend to go on long walks with my almost one-year-old while he's taking his afternoon nap. And on these walks, apart from my son's necessities, of course, I have my trusty Fuji X100V. You're making me jealous. That's definitely a camera I'm on the hunt for now. I've seen, actually, or maybe I shouldn't say this because you're going to go and buy the one I want, some excellent versions on mpb.com, some used versions. Some used ones. So I'm going to probably nab myself one of those if we ever get back to shooting weddings. Oh, moving on. And one of or several of your podcast episodes running on my phone. I'm slowly catching up with the episodes, loving the content. Even the older ones now are wow, even though you say you were trying to find your way. I was. That's not me seeking compliments. I did feel for the first, and that's the beauty of it, about anything that we do creatively, isn't it? Whether we're making photographs, experimenting in different genres, landscape or portraits or street, or maybe heading out for our first few weddings or editorial or whatever you're doing, or project making. That really is the beauty, isn't it, of sort of building as you go. And I do feel that this podcast has done that, particularly the photo walk episodes on the Friday. The content, he says, deeply relevant then as it is now. Well, you're very kind. Thank you very much, Theodore. And the sound quality, no words. Well, my words, I'm not quite sure I can take all this flattery. I can see you have a background in radio and even the storytelling. I just love how you bring us back to the photo walk from the inserts of guest interviews by playing a small snippet of your footsteps. Well, I do, see, when I stop, he says, delightful storytelling. Well, thank you. When I stop talking, what I tend to do is I lower my microphone straight away. And I might walk a bit more heavily, but I always see that as the segue, you see, to take us gently into the next piece. Anyway, keep up the good work. When I get around to it, you may remember the intricacies of a life with a young baby. I'm bound to become a patron. Well, I do. Thanks, T. Thank you very much. Or Theodore, thank you very much. I'll look out for you in Patreon. And gradually getting to everybody who joins in with personal messages. And of course, you'll be featured in Patron of the Day too. Right. It's time for Last Mail of the Week time. Walter Grossenbacher. Hello, Photography Daily. What a treat this episode with Sean is. Episode 234, The Meaning in the Making, you mean, don't you? I already pre-ordered Sean's book some weeks ago, and your episode just strengthened my joy, looking forward to the day the book will arrive in my mailbox. Your questions are fantastic and Sean's answers are wonderful. This Milky Way disc, or his thoughts about philosophy, and of course the outlook of possible more to come from him. Thanks again and best wishes. From Walter. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the conversation. I always love talking to Sean. He's moved, hasn't he, now from London to the wonderful city of York. In fact, I think he's just outside York. And I've said I'm going to go up and visit. I've imposed myself upon him already. I hope he's ready. But you're probably wondering what this Milky Way analogy is that Theodore mentioned. Let me play you that part from last Wednesday's show, where Sean talks about why we make stuff as creatives. That's what this episode was about. It's all about his new book that's coming out, which isn't about photography per se. It's about anybody that makes something. And anyway, in particular, that moment that he was lying down as a young child, looking up at the Milky Way and learning, although he didn't so much know it at the time, but I suppose, creating this theory in his mind of chaos, because that's what this concept is. We create, we make things to mean something out of the chaos. Here's Sean Tucker.
We'd been told at school that week about the Milky Way.
Yeah.
And our teacher had shown us a picture of the Milky Way as this, sort of disc of light balls in the sky. And I remember I've always had a fairly good ability to visualize something, to picture something. And she was sort of trying to explain to us how here was where we were on one of its little spiral arms. There was a point where we sat. And that when we looked at the Milky Way at night, we weren't looking at a line sort of smeared across the sky. We were actually looking three-dimensionally into a huge, a mind-blowingly large disc of spinning suns is basically what we were looking at. And I could see that. And I remember seeing it in the class going, that's big, and kind of putting it out of my mind as being too big.
Yeah.
And then cut to that Saturday, my family my mom had been divorced for about 5 years. We were living in Botswana, just my brother, my mom and I. My brother was about 5 years old. I was 9 at the time, I think. And we made friends with people who lived close to us. And it was a couple the father was a miner on the local mine, and they had 2 daughters. And it became a Saturday tradition that we'd load up the Land Rover and we'd drive off into the bush, and we'd just find a spot somewhere random. And as the sun set, they'd break out a cooler, and the adults would have drinks, and we'd have soft drinks and go running around and playing. And we found this dry riverbed. And as the sun set, we'd been running around for hours, and I was probably just exhausted. And I lay down on the sand, and it had started to get dark. It was kind of that blue hour stage, and the stars started to come out, and I saw the Milky Way, and I kind of put 2 and 2 together. So I had this knowledge which I picked up in class, and then suddenly the experience of it, looking at the Milky Way, feeling this second of absolute terror at like how big this disc was I was looking into. I'd never thought about it like a disc because no one had told me, and thinking I might fall into it. Mm-hmm. Like suddenly for the first time, questioning the permanence of gravity. And looking into this disc, and that I would never have talked about order and chaos then, but like putting it together in my head a little bit, like, can gravity just let go? Having this moment of fear, is it going to let me go? Am I going to fall into this thing some point in my life right now, maybe? Because that's when it felt so terrifying.
The Meaning in the Making is Sean Tucker's book about why we make and create, and it's out very soon. Or if you're listening to this in the future, we're back with the universe and chaos, it may already be out and you've read it. Well, that's it for this week's Photo Walk. I wish we could walk even longer and every day during summer. Keep sending your questions or feedback to studio@photographydaily.show so that I can feature you in the mailbag edition. Send your pictures too for the first thing you see, or a handful of Photo Walk pictures that you've made, 2,000 pixels wide, please. Be sure to visit today's website show page for links to guests and things discussed, and all the pictures, including my own offering from South Devon. You'll find a link on the description in your podcast player app. Thanks to mpb.com, the number one team when it comes to buying used, selling your used, or trading in Europe, the UK and States. Next Wednesday, Tom Stoddart is my guest, talking about his new book, Extraordinary Women, One Not to Be Missed. Music in the show was from artlist.io, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you, and talking with you next time.
There we go. There's our week in South Devon. I tell you what, I could have... Really, if I'd have thought about it, I should have brought a load more letters away and we could have done some more photo walking. We'll just have to return. Perfect excuse. What do you think, Carl?
Well, not sure about that, to be honest.
Oh, why not?
It was very hilly.
Well, that's true.
And I've only got a 1.6 litre engine.
Well, I was trying to be good, you see, and not buy super powerful big engines with diesels, and that's why I chose you. That's why I adopted you, Carl.
I know, and don't get me wrong, I'm very appreciative.
Well, there we go then.
But it's still hilly.
Yes, it is. But what about the views?
Yeah, I'll give you that. They're very nice.
Shall we head home?
Or back to the quarry, or back to Berkshire?
Oh, sadly tomorrow back to Berkshire. I've enjoyed our time here though. Come on, let's go grab a last Barbie before we depart, yeah?
All right.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.